Hi everyone, my name is Roelant Prins. I'm a Dutch guy and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Adyen, and we're a global payments company. I'm going to talk about payments worldwide today. Our company was started back in Amsterdam, and I moved 2 months ago here to San Francisco to help grow our San Francisco office because, yeah, very important market for us. And I feel I've landed well after 2 months. So, I brought my 2 young sons. I brought 4 kids here. I brought 2 sons in their Giants costume to school this morning. I look at the red tricycle every week. I get the emails. I know where I find the relevant pumpkin patch for my kids. I'm cycling to work every day like I do in Amsterdam. A bit more hilly here, so a bit more hard work. And when I'm having breakfast in the morning and I say to my kids, do you want some water? They're correcting me and they're saying, no, that is water. It's water. So it's going really fast, and it shows a bit like how these cultural differences and the differences between countries are. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about working globally, working in different countries. And I think for any one of you wanting to go global and having that aspiration to scale, it's key to understand what these global differences are. And if you look at payments, the global differences are still massive. It's unbelievable. If I talk to family and friends back home in the Netherlands and I'm telling that I'm using a card to pay for a $2 latte, they're like, really? I mean, you'd never do that back in Europe. I mean, maybe in the UK, but that's it. You don't pay with a credit card for anything under $50 or so. My wife would have her credit card locked away in a safe. It only comes out when we go on holiday. And that's what many other people do in Europe. I mean, you don't use a credit card unless you go travel. And that just explains how things are different. And it's important to realize that when going global and scaling there. So this just shows you, all types of payment methods worldwide that are being used. And that's what I wanted to go through today. Just talk through a few of the key countries and how do payments work to give you a good feel of, hey, there is more than cards. And it's important to realize this when you start to go internationally, that things are different, and prepare for that. Worldwide, outside of the US, I think, credit card penetration is about 50–60% max. And there's a huge amount of alternatives. And I'm going to show you some of the key things that we see. Adyen makes that possible, so we are one platform and we handle a lot of different payments worldwide for specifically larger companies. So these are some of the companies we work for worldwide, and any market outside of the US, but nowadays also in the US we help them with. So let's look at some of these countries and let's look at some of the characteristics you might face. So in Brazil, but also in Mexico, it's still really, really common to pay with cash. So here's an example of how someone would make a cash payment. You either make a purchase online or in your phone. You'll get a QR or a barcode that they will often still print out, and they'll go to a physical cash point to make an actual cash payment, and only then, someone will ship you the goods. I mean, is this really happening today? For a lot of retailers, it's more than 20% of their transactions, both in Brazil as well as in Mexico. Another thing which is pretty unique in the same countries, really big in Brazil, is paying by installments. So this goes back to when hyperinflation was around in Brazil, when many people didn't have a card. People, due to the economical situation, we're looking at maybe paying in brackets to get a purchase, and by now it's the biggest way of paying. When you're paying with a credit card in Brazil, you pay in installments. So what you're seeing here, if I'm making a purchase for, say, a product of 500 rice or even 50 rice, people will have the option to choose, am I going to pay in 2 installments, 3, or even 12 installments, meaning I'm going to pay for this product, and it could be actually a $50 product, over a period of 12 months. So what you get now, and this is not only for e-com, but you see that in every store in Brazil, people are making purchases and they're thinking about their credit spending balance on their card, and they're thinking about how much spending balance do I have on an annual basis. And these people are calculating all the time, and they know exactly what they can spend. The interesting thing is that it's so baked into the culture that, you know, anyone, my colleagues, people, and not only people that have a very low income, everybody is just doing it. It's the way you pay for stuff in Brazil. And why is it relevant? Because if you support this as a B2C merchant, for example, supporting installments, you'll see at least 20% uplift in your conversion. People need this. The only way to get it is to work with local banks, and that's where it becomes a bit complicated. Very important for Brazil. What we're looking at here is a convenience store, which is an important concept in Japan. So again, in Japan, you see that, you know, very modern culture, very technology-driven country. A lot of payment transactions, though, for e-com business are done in these type of convenience stores. People go there, they'll go to a counter, they'll bring their utility bills, they'll bring, again, these vouchers, they'll pay for e-com transactions in this store. And, you know, I'm wondering why. Why do people do this? There must be much simpler ways to go about it. My colleagues in Asia are telling me, well, you know, think about the life in Japan. There's a lot of pressure. People are working long hours. I mean, to get a break, to go out there, is something people enjoy doing. And therefore, people like to feed this way of making payments and transactions. It fits into their culture. Again, to be successful in Japan, you want to support a method like this because it can easily be like 20% of your revenues and turnover. Let's go to Holland, the country where I'm from. And we have, you know, as I said earlier, credit cards in Holland, like in many other European countries, are not used on a day-to-day basis. We live every day by using internet banking-based systems. That's what we use for making, you know, wires to friends, to paying for bills. Internet banking is everywhere, and we're using it all the time. So what you do in Holland, there's a thing called Ideal, and this is for online transactions, mobile transactions, represents easily 70, sometimes 60% of all payments. This is the payment method that people want to pay with in Holland. Basically what you do is you go to your bank, either in an app or online, you use a thing like this, and you generate a token. You know, you stick the card in there, you generate a number, you put in a PIN, and it will then authenticate the payment. It's complex, it's not simple, but people want to use it. They trust their banks, they trust these systems, and therefore they're really happy to use this. They don't really mind. It's a few actions more than that you would do with a card. 70%, if you're going to Holland, which is a small country but a big market, you have to support this, otherwise people are going to think you're a joke. A bit similar in Germany. Germany is again a bit different, quite a bit different from Holland from a cultural point of view. Two big things from a German culture are, A, there's a lot of sensitivity about privacy. You know, people don't want to give data to others, very sensitive topic. And the other big thing is people don't like credit. Germans don't like credit. I mean, it's a harsh statement, but it's true. They don't like credit. So credit cards have never taken off. Everybody pays either by open invoice. Someone ships you the products. They stick an invoice with it. They'll look at it. It's there. It's real. And then they'll pay you. They're also, you know, there's not a lot of fraud in Germany because of who they are. That's helpful. The other thing is direct debit. Direct debit means you pull the money from someone's bank account as a merchant or a utility provider. That's easily 60% of all payments in Germany. And because it's not credit, because you're taking the money right from the account, the Germans know exactly, and every day of the month, what is my balance? They're really comfortable with it. 60 to 70%, the Lastschriftverfahren. Very important if you want to do anything in Germany, support this payment method. Russia, so Russia, this is a Kiwi terminal. There's thousands of these types of terminals throughout Moscow, throughout Russia. And like the convenience store concept, in Russia people use this all the time for paying bills, but also making payment purchases for transactions they've made. So there's a wallet concept with it. But this is what you see. If you want to be successful in Russia, I mean, this is easily 25% of all traffic. And there are some other comparable methods like Kiwi. I think Visa, MasterCard in Russia will give you maybe 30% of the market. And then let's look at China. You know, big market for a lot of the companies we work with. Everybody wants a piece of it, obviously, as they're coming this way. One of the big things in China is Alipay, the payment method from originally Alibaba Group. It supports a whole range of debit cards. All these local, there's like 30 or 40 individual local debit card schemes throughout China. And then there's a lot of internet banking schemes that are supported through this, and a wallet like PayPal. And Alipay supports it all through their own interface. You know, we see almost half of the payments that we process nowadays go through Alipay. Again, has nothing to do with a Visa or MasterCard. You know, they're optimizing their experience. It's critical. And then the final thing I had here as an example, 3D Secure, verified by Visa. I'm not sure whether a lot of you know that, but any company out of, you know, Silicon Valley looking at payments, they look at seamless experience. It must be seamless. So 3D Secure, where you actually have to redirect a card holder to a screen where they have to authenticate themselves, that's a no-go. I mean, that's a killer, right? I mean, that kills the whole checkout process. So we always get, no, we're not doing that. There are markets, India, the banks require payments to go through 3D Secure. Otherwise, everything's getting rejected. In the UK, people are so used to this, they've optimized this, that almost everybody sees a 4 to 5% uplift in conversion when you support this thing. The cardholders know how it works. The banks give you better authorization rates. And in the end, although it's clunky, the actual output is 4 to 5% more revenue. So it's very counterintuitive. And only by looking at data, you see that in certain markets, this is indeed a nightmare and it kills your business. But in some markets, it's actually working pretty well. Then finally, I wanted to end with an example of how we work, what we do. So Evernote is one of the companies we work with globally. We handle all their payments. We've rolled out with them in 100 countries together, where we support all the local forms of payments, local currencies. And we recently launched with them in China with Alipay, and we saw a 10% uplift as a result of that in actual business. So that was a pretty nice case, which I wanted to give to you as a result. Thank you.
Well done, well done. And what do you recommend for making payouts internationally, i.e., for a US marketplace to pay a seller in Brazil, say? So paying out, I know that's a big problem for people, paying people in other countries. I remember we tried to pay people in other countries with PayPal, and it didn't work. Getting money out.
No, that's a big challenge. It's difficult because you know, the only way to effectively pay out in a lot of these markets is by doing bank transfers. And by getting a bank account opened in markets nowadays. I remember we had a different payment company about 15 years ago, Debit, and at that time, you know, you could drive to a bank in any country throughout Europe. You could show up at the bank location, and half an hour or an hour later, you would walk away with a bank account. Nowadays, to open a bank account for any payment company in any market is a nightmare. It's a very, very complex process. It takes months. So in a lot of these markets outside of the US, the US, the best way to ultimately pay out is by doing wire transfers. But you need local bank accounts because otherwise it's going to be really costly. But there's companies out there that can help with that have those bank account networks. And I think that's the most effective way of doing it.
And what are your thoughts on Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and how they might play a role smoothing things out around the world?
I think the whole the Bitcoin infrastructure for things like payouts, if I explain to you the complexity that we're facing today with all these bank accounts that you can hardly open, and once you have them, to get access to them in an automated way, the Bitcoin, ultimately from my point of view, the Bitcoin infrastructure could have potential to solve this issue. So that's, I think, longer term potential, which is really interesting. I think today, if I look at merchants that come to us wanting to support Bitcoin, we're adding it now to the suite. It's still limited, but longer term, the infrastructure, I think, can make things much easier in these areas.
And how does Apple Pay change the game in your mind, or does it? Do you think Apple Pay, I mean, it's a little bit aside from international payments, but we do see that sort of NFC payment going on in other places in a major way, Japan, Korea, I guess. Do you think it's going to be successful here?
Yeah, I think so. It's going to launch, it's going to take some time, especially with retailers having to adopt. Consumers will adopt pretty quickly, I think. Selfishly, we're extremely excited about it because what it does, we work as well for a lot of retailers, traditional retailers, people like Under Armour, people that have physical stores. And what we are trying to do with our platform is not only handle payments on mobile or on e-com, but also in store and use an internet-based infrastructure to take payments from terminals in stores. With things like Apple Pay coming to the market, that's giving us an opportunity. People want to make changes now to their terminals. And when these changes happen, we can bring our platform in. And so it's going to drive more change, which is great, because in this physical infrastructure in stores, change is very expensive and slow.
Awesome. Well, let's hear it for, Roland. Sorry. Thanks, Roland.